My dear friends, history will judge the impact of our nation's pitiful coronavirus testing per capita. We are presently 44th in the world. May our ranking increase. History will judge the effect of our late start in stopping the devastating spread of this pandemic, which is causing the death of an American every 47 seconds. History will judge that. Moreover, the resistance of our state and neighboring Mississippi to enact a statewide stay-at-home policy until last week has created needless deaths in the name of reckless freedom. There's good news, but it isn't national or regional. It's the relatively quick and bold actions of our mayors to shut down the city and county early on and enable Memphians to minimize loss of life and maximize the Torah words emblazoned on the front facade of our old Temple Israel building at Poplar, Montgomery. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love thy neighbor as thyself. By staying at home instead of gathering in person for worship, we are saving not only our own lives, we are literally saving each other's lives. Before the essential implementation of physical distancing and the recent race to correct the testing mess, an interfaith coalition of the most unlikely partners, yours truly, the senior pastor of Bellevue Baptist Church, the bishops of Kojic, the Episcopal and Catholic churches, Muslim imams, senior pastors of Hope Church, New Direction, faith leaders across all lines came together at our TI Crosstown Concourse neighbor Church Health under the direction of the great Reverend and Dr. Scott Morris. Our task force is called the Memphis Faith Community COVID-19 Response. You could find it online as a resource for everything from donations of masks to keeping healthcare and frontline teams safe to facts and myths about COVID-19 on the churchhealth.org website and our faith community's response. Starting Monday, Church Health is opening yet another testing site at Crosstown Concourse by appointment. Our citywide goal is 1,000 tests per day over the next 6 months. So if anyone you know is showing even mild symptoms, a fever, cough, or shortness of breath, the testing is free with or without insurance as we starve the virus as a total Memphis community, no matter what our ethnicity, faith, or race. It was actually an article written not by a rabbi, but by a Christian colleague in Metro DC who expressed what I have been feeling in recent weeks leading this service. Before COVID-19, Pastor David Platt writes, I would speak every Sunday before thousands of people gathered for church from across the DC area. Now the scene is vastly different. I stand alone in a cavernous room, staring into a camera surrounded by vacant seats. You'd think that it would be hard to speak to people you can't see in front of you. But in a strange way, it's not, he writes, because in my mind and my heart, I can see them. Forgive me for modifying what Pastor Platt sees with what I have been seeing in my mind and heart. I can see the Temple family of 4 gathered in their living room to watch this service online after their mom's recovery from COVID-19. I see the elderly Temple husband whose wife is ill, and another man whose wife passed away a couple of years ago. Both are extremely vulnerable to the virus and living in lonely isolation because of it. I see the young Jewish millennial who lost her job and another young man who called me depressed. Both were already prone to anxiety and are now experiencing fear as they never felt it before. I see a temple couple quarantined with their adorable baby girl. I see the parent looking after their child with special needs. I see the business people who feel awful they had to lay people off, and I see the employee just laid off who doesn't know what to do next. I see the temple member who was hopeful that the cough and fever were normal, but it was pneumonia as we prayed over the phone while she was taking oxygen support. Returning to what Pastor Platt sees that I also see on this Passover Easter weekend, I see exhausted nurses, doctors, medical researchers, grocery store employees who are working long days and sleepless nights for the good of people they do not even know. I see people who realize that social distancing from each other doesn't mean we stop caring for each other in wise ways. I see healthy men and women who are trying to make a difference locally since the moment our schools and businesses shut down. In other words, my friends, I still see this great Temple Israel faith community, even without the hundreds of you who normally fill this chapel and campus on Fridays and on busy Sundays. I see the people who are now hurting, and I see the people in our temple and community faith response who are helping. I see people who are struggling as I close my eyes on the phone, and I see people in my Zoom calls with our task force who are serving. And at this service, I also see beyond Temple and Memphis to thousands who have joined our congregation from across the country virtually in recent weeks, and even from Israel, who watch this service tomorrow on Facebook Live. And you know who else I see in my mind and heart? I see the 50 people who weren't able to attend the annual Passover Seder Cheryl and I have hosted in our home for over 20 years. One of those attendees, a fantastic human and Jew from New York, he sent me a private Passover greeting just before our canceled Seder 2 nights ago. Without knowing it, he summed up a central message in this week's Torah verses on this only Sabbath that falls during Passover. Along with his Passover emoji, he sent these words. I remember a story about a rabbi during a natural disaster. He was asked how he could explain such a tragic act of God. The rabbi answered that the disaster was an act of nature. The act of God occurred when people stepped up to help each other. In this week's Torah verses, Moses, the prince of Egypt, the stutterer who heard the call of a God who wants all people free. Moses had moments of doubt, anxiety, and stress, leading his people out of Egypt and through the wilderness. This lonely man of faith this week begs God, Har'eni na et kvodecha, please God, let me behold your presence, let me see your face. And according to the Torah, God replies, V'ra'ita et achorai ufanai lo yera'u, my dear Moses, you cannot see my face, because I'm not a human being. You cannot see my face, but you can see my after effects. like a sailing vessel leaves behind it a wake of white foam, or just as footprints on the beach indicate the presence of human feet, so do the unspeakable wonders of God's after effects leave their mark. How do I see viewers like you who aren't in these seats? The same way I see God, the invisible God, by making God in each of you visible. How do you make an invisible God visible? You make God visible in the acts of love and kindness that you're able to do for others, acts that take an impersonal, sometimes cruel and uncaring world and make it caring and kind. You see God in acts of loving kindness and true sacrifice going on right now. The women and men making 24/7 sacrifices across our city and throughout our country as we approach 500,000 Americans infected and 20,000 dead by the end of this Shabbos weekend. God tells Moses to worry less about seeing the divine as an object and see God more in the human capacity to care and feel and empathize with those who are suffering. How fitting that of all weeks, this is the one when the Torah focuses not on God's looks, but on what we human beings can do by living in God's image. V'ra'ita et achorai ufanai lo yera'u. You cannot see my face, but you can see my after effects. Every human being rides through life on the after effects, the wakes of others. Parents and grandparents leave after effects and wakes they never see. And those waves of love wash ashore in moments and places they never knew in their children's lives. Even when we say goodbye to family members and friends, they keep making waves in our lives, don't they? But unlike boats, we human beings can always leave a wake with our lives, even when we're not moving like a boat. We can make after effects even when we are staying in our homes and sheltering in place. We can write or call or check in on someone whom we know is alone beyond our family and social bubbles. We can get involved with Temple Serves Memphis and our faith community COVID-19 at Church Health Outreach for supplies and masks for our frontline teams. You cannot see my face, says God, but you can see my after effects. Obviously, God does not have a real face, but God does have a presence. And Moses and each of us can stand in that presence. Moses stood in that presence and was so transformed according to the Torah. He had karan or pnei Moshe. He had light on his face when he came down from Mount Sinai. The light of God, the act of God occurs when people step up to help each other, whoever is in our presence. And let us say, Amen.